Hey guys, what's up? My name is Ratsmah, and we're back with another arena draft walkthrough. This week we're gonna play some Shaman. Uh, so we have a choice here between Lava Burst, Ancestral Spirit, and Gadget Sand. First about Lava Burst. Lava Burst is generally okay in arena. It's a little bit worse than Fireball since you're paying 5 mana for 5 damage, but it's never really played around. No one really plays around the 5 damage from Shaman, so you get some extra value that way. The Ancestral Spirit is a good support card, but it depends on you having a board, so it goes along with the Shaman class like playstyle philosophy that you need a board to make plays out of things like Flame Tongue Totem or even like the Wind Fury, 4 mana 3/3, and things like Bloodlust. So board control is really important in Shaman, and Ancestral Spirit goes along with that, which could also be a bad thing. It doesn't help you come back really from a losing state. It makes you vulnerable to something like a Silence if you use it on your turn without sacking your minion. Also, there's the Gadget Sand here, a little bit better in Shaman thanks to the low cost spells that you do get in Shaman, like the Lightning Bolts, the Crackles, the Rock Biters, the Earth Shocks. Between the three, I think this is more of a preference pick between Ancestral Spirit and Lava Burst. Lava Burst would be better if we had a weak early or mid game. That way we could choose a turn where we can come back and use Lava Burst, because on the initial turn where you do play it, you only do spend 3 mana. So it's a good card to help you come back on the board, and the board is really important in Shaman. Or we can take the Ancestral Spirit, which is a support card. If we had a better curve and we had a solid early mid game, and it looked like we were gonna have a board to use things like Ancestral Spirit on, Ancestral Spirit would be better. But since we don't have any clue what we're gonna draft, I'll go with the Lava Burst as the safer option, because it'll never really be a dead card. Here it's really between Mana Wraith and Imp Master. Mana Wraith really isn't terrible. Sure, it's bad. It's a bad card. It's 2 mana 2/2, but there are some situations where you can play it and it could be really strong. But up against a premium class like Imp Master, or a premium card like Imp Master, it really doesn't stand up to it. So Imp Master is also synergizes with the Shaman philosophy of having a bunch of guys on board to buff with Flame Tongue Totem or Bloodlust. So that's really good. We'll take it here. Here it's between Lightning Bolt and Stormpike Commando. Lightning Bolt's very cheap removal, very cost efficient. A lot of people ask me on stream what I like better, Rockbiter or Lightning Bolt. In Arena, you want to pick Rockbiter over Lightning Bolt most of the time, because a lot of Arena is more tempo-based play, and you need to keep up card for card and turn for turn. So when I say turn for turn, you never want to fall behind because you use the Rockbiter, and you never want to play something weaker, because generally on like turn 3 you play a 3-drop, on turn 4 you play a 4-drop, on turn 5 you play a 5-drop. Something like a Lightning Bolt could upset that plan, and you're going to be playing something slightly smaller than your opponent's minion, and they're going to be killing it, and you're going to have to recover and use another Lightning Bolt, or like it's a good amount worse than Rockbiter in Arena. Stormpike Commando. There's a lot of good 5-drops in the game. Most 5-drops are better than Stormpike Commando. Even like a Spiteful Smith generally is better than the Stormpike Commando. Just the low HP on Stormpike Commando makes it a pretty weak body. The exception to this is if you have a really strong early game, then you can expect to protect the Stormpike Commando body, so it's not going to be trading down with a 2-drop or something like that. The Wind Fury is interesting. It works in 2 ways. If you have a strong early and mid game, you might be able to get value out of Wind Fury by double trading into 2 things with a big guy. You can also use that as a finisher. So that's a little something, but you never really want to pick up finishers and like kind of like support cards early on, and that's the same reason we took the Lava Burst over the Ancestral Spirit. Here I'm gonna go with the Lightning Bolt pick. Just cheap removal, really good. Stormbite Commando, really not good enough to be our 5-drop, since there are a lot of 5-drops. Acidic Swamp Ooze versus Bluegill. This one is a little bit closer. I think in most classes, you would go with the Ooze, or even just like a general 2-mana 3/2 or 2-mana 2/3 over a Bluegill. But in Shaman, you do get the Bloodlust and the Flame Tongue, so it makes Bluegill Warrior a lot better. Also, another thing to think about is the fact that Shaman is really board dependent. So you're really at a disadvantage if you have a bunch of support cards in your hand, and Shaman tends to get a lot of support cards, and you have no way to get back on the board. So that's when a fast card like Bluegill Warrior can really benefit you. As of right now, we don't really have any support cards to work with Bluegill Warrior, so I will go with the Ooze, but it is something to consider. Like if we had one Flame Tongue already, I probably would go with the Bluegill here. So Tiger versus Anti-Killbot and Frostwolf Warlord. So we talked about how Shaman is board dependent. Tiger is a card that'll help you get trade initiative on your turn, since it's going to be near impossible for your opponent to remove it unless they do something like Flame Strike, Flame Cannon, or Double Flame Cannon. But generally in Arena, that kind of stuff doesn't happen. You're gonna get the trade initiative with Tiger, so that's really important, not only in Shaman, in every class, but especially in Shaman, since you do get the minion buffs. Something like a Frostwolf Warlord is also pretty good in Shaman. You got that natural synergy with your hero power to make Frostwolf Warlord bigger. But here, I think I'm going to value the Tiger over the Frostwolf Warlord for consistency as opposed to power. So here, pretty easy Mech Warper pick. Sorry, Shield Baron and Priestess of Loon. I'm trying to make this arena draft go a little bit faster. I know sometimes we kind of have these go on for a little bit too long. So here we go. Stormforged Axe versus Rockbiter. This one is a little bit tougher. I choose the first Stormforged Axe really high just because it's so valuable to be able to ping something. A lot of times in a lot of non-ping classes, your opponents will leave things at 1 or 2 health to take advantage of the fact that you don't have a hero power that does 1 damage. So you tend to get more value out of your pings if you are playing one of those classes. However, Rockbiter weapon is really, really good. We don't really have any like Wind Fury synergies with Rockbiter. This one's actually giving me a hard time. I think I will go with the Rockbiter though. I think it's slightly better than Stormforged Axe. If we see this pick again, I will definitely go for the Stormforged Axe. But I do prefer to have one Rockbiter just because it's just an effective removal, and you can almost guarantee that it will remove your opponent's 2-drop, while Stoneforge Axe may have trouble removing some of your opponent's 2-drops. Another thing to consider when you have overload cards being offered, look at your curve, right? So if we had a heavy 2 slot, Stoneforge Axe might be a little more appropriate. Also, if you have a low 3 slot, because Stoneforge Axe kind of forces you to replay the turn 2 again. So I mean, right now that's not really the case, and that's not exactly why I'm taking Rockbiter, but it is something to look at and think about. I think when we go deeper into the draft, we'll kind of see situations where we have to pick smart to make our curve better with overload cards. So here it's between Ogre Magi and Windspeaker. Generally, I don't pick Windspeaker very high, even though the Wind Fury can, it is a finisher, and sometimes it even gets value. Interestingly enough, it works really well with the Tiger. The Ogre Magi, generally not very good in any class, but if it were to be good in a class, it would probably be Shaman, since once again we get the cheap removal. So it's more possible for us to plan like a Ogre Magi spell damage Lightning Bolt or spell damage Lava Burst turn, because it is a cheap combo. Here, what are we going to go for? I think I would prefer to have the bigger body. I kind of see these cards being equally situational, the spell damage and the Wind Fury, but the Ogre Magi does have the bigger body, and it can trade 1-for-1 with a good amount of 4-drops. So I'm going to take it here. Okay. Mech Warper versus Tinkertown Tech. So far we have 2 mechs with the Mech Warper and the Harvest Golem. Here I'm going to have to say that we have to go for another Mech Warper. The Tinkertown Tech is decent, but we don't really need 3-drops. We're a third through our draft and we have 2 3-drops picked up already, and they're very high quality 3-drops. We're on our way to picking up 6 3-drops, or 6 3-drops by the end of the draft, which is good enough. So we don't really have to take a situational one here. Mech Warper is solid, and maybe we can start some mech synergy stuff. And in Shaman, you do get the rolling Zap-O-Matics as well, so maybe we can pull off some crazy combos there. Totemic Might, Dollar Mage, and Dust Devil. This is not a great couple of choices. I'm gonna have to say that it has to be Dollar Mage. The Totemic Might really is never a consideration. The Dust Devil it usually doesn't work, and maybe if it didn't have the overload, right, it might be okay, but really it's just like worse whirling zap. So we're gonna go with Dollar Mage. Maybe we can make some spell damage synergies, pick our spells a little bit higher. I think it's fine. Oh, another one of these. So once again, same reason for Totemic Might and Dust Devil. We're gonna go with the Mad Scientist. Youthful Brewmaster versus Ancient Brew. So I talked to Merps from Hearth Arena, and we went over some of the stats from players that recorded games through Hearth Arena, and with a pretty large sample size, they've discovered that cards that minus tempo you, especially Ancient Brew, because it has bad stats as well, are really, really bad in Arena. And Ancient Brew is especially bad just because of 4 health. I know I always bring this up about how bad 4 health is, but yeah, this is definitely the case here, where we don't want it, because since we're playing such a board dependent class, we never want to minus tempo on the board. We'd rather make a lateral play. Maybe if we want to slow down, we can play a totem or play our hero power, which is always valuable for us. So here we'll take the Youthful Brewmaster. Has a higher chance of being played early on, where we probably don't have anything on the board, and also if we do need to brew something back, we can do it for cheap. And the Magma Rager is Magma Rager. So we have a choice between Bluegill Warrior and War Golem. I think we got to start looking at our curve now. So let's count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2-drops. So we have 5 2-drops. I would prefer to end up with 6 or 7, just so we have a strong can have reliable turns early on, so we can set up to have something on board. So 6 or 7. So we want to pick up maybe 1 or 2 more 2-drops, and we're only halfway through our draft, so we can pick 2s really low. We don't have to worry about our 2 slot. We have 2 3-drops. I don't really count Dollar Mage because I can't expect to play it on 3 and have it maintain our board control. So we have 2 3-drops. Want to pick up like 5 or 6 by the end of the draft. So we'll value 3-drops slightly higher, but I think we're on our way to filling up our 3 slot quota. 4-drops, we really need 4-drops. I would prefer to have 6 by the end of the draft, 5, 6. So we'll pick 4-drops really high, and then we have 2 late game cards. I think in Shaman you can curve a little bit lower and maybe not have like a cheesy finisher, but like have a finisher. I think that's generally the right plan, especially since your worst matchup is the slower classes. Because most Shaman decks end up being very mid-rangey, we want to make sure we're okay against things like Druid and Priest and Mage, especially Mage, since Mage flame strikes once, and when you're playing Shaman and you lose your board, once again, we're very board dependent, so that's kind of what will lose us our games in Arena. So here, I'm going to go with the War Golem, something that survives flame strike and also makes your deck a little bit heavier, especially since we don't need 2s. Here, pretty easy Rockbiter pick. And Hex, easy Hex. Sorry, pretty straightforward picks here. Silverhand Knight versus Ooze. Once again, we have enough 2s. I'm going to go with the Silverhand Knight. It goes along with the Shaman playstyle where you want to have things on the board to buff, so it's especially good with things like Bloodlust and Flame Tongue Totem. So we'll take it here. Guys that make guys are especially good in Shaman because of that, because of the board synergy that you get. So here, another Hex, got our anti-late game. And this is something to consider is there are some classes that prefer to not have big minions themselves, but would rather have anti-big minions. For example, off the top of my head, maybe you have like a very aggressively curved priest deck, which isn't extremely common, but if you think about an aggressively curved priest deck that doesn't have very many big minions but just has Shadow Word Death, you might be able to use the tempo you get from Shadow Word Death, clearing your opponent's big things in the late game to push out more damage and win the game. And that's kind of what we want to do. We want to aggressively grab the board with our 2, 3, 4 drops, and then maybe use things like Hex to keep our opponents at bay while we push damage through and win. Because we never really want to go to the super late game against the slower classes. That's generally a bad idea, just because we're going to get outvalued card for card because our opponents are going to have bigger cards on average than us. Here, between these are some interesting legendaries. Okay, so Mechaneer is the 9 mana 9/7, a huge investment. I usually don't like sorry, let me start this sentence over. I usually don't like 9-drops in Arena just because they're so hard to play. Things like Alexstrasza or Ysera, even though Ysera is like the ultimate late game card, it is still very, very hard to get on the board without you dying. It would have to be an extremely slow game for it to work. Here, as a first pick, I would probably take the Millhouse Manastorm just because it's aggressive, it grabs the board, and that's what you need in Shaman. But we do have a lot of 2-drops. Maybe we do want to go with the Mechaneer, since what we lack is bigger bodies that survive larger AoE spells. I think the Mechaneer is fine. The lower wall control, probably not appropriate in this deck, seeing as how we have a lot of spells. Yeah. Frostwolf Warlord versus Haunted Creeper versus Worgen Infiltrator. Haunted Creeper is especially good in Shaman. Things that stick on the board are really good, like Harvest Golem, Haunted Creeper. Unfortunately, we're 2/3 to our draft and we didn't pick up a Flame Tongue. Flame Tongue is extremely valuable in Shaman. It's how you make your hero power actually do something. And once you have a couple Flame Tongues and a board full of totems, that's when your hero power becomes one of the best ones in the game. And that's kind of what we want to set up for. So far, we actually don't have that. So here, sorry, that's, I don't know what that is. I just moved houses, so, and this actually isn't my house, and no one's home, so we'll just let that ring for a second. So here we could go with the Worgen Infiltrator, but I think our early game is covered for with the number of 2-drops that we have, and we have anti-early games with the Rockbiters and the Lightning Bolts. Here we might want to go for another big minion. We have 5 late game cards, which is probably enough for this point in the game, or for this point in the draft. I might prefer to take a Haunted Creeper, seeing as how our 4 slot is weaker. Maybe we want to play like double 2-drop on turn 4, so we want to fill up our 2 slot even more. I think that's fine, especially since we have 3 very solid turn 5 plays. I think you can go with either one, but I want to make our matchups maybe not suited towards beating a naturally bad matchup like Mage. Like if we're naturally worse against Mage, we don't want to go all in on countering Mage, because even if we do, we generally won't be that good against Mage anyways. So we want to win the matchups that we're good against, which is more aggressive. We're very good against aggressive classes with the cheap removal and the solid early game. So we want to just have a solid win there, and then when we face a slower class, we can deal with that then. So here we have a choice between Bloodfen Raptor and Dancing Swords. We still need 3-drops in this deck, and we have a lot of 2s. So something I'm worried about with this deck is we have way too much early game, like way too much, and we don't have mid game. That's the problem. We have a good amount of twos, and we have a good amount of late game, but our 4 slot is not there at all. And for 3 drops, we have 2 3 drops. So here, I'm actually going to take the Dancing Swords. It can make this deck a little bit more aggressive, and also it'll help us survive the mid game. We got the synergy with the Dancing Swords, Wailing Soul. So between the Feral Spirit and the Wailing Soul, I think this is pretty close. Wailing Soul is never really terrible. It's probably a little bit worse in Shaman than it is in any other class, just because you don't want to be silencing your totems. But generally it's okay. You get to choose when you play Wailing Soul. Your opponent can't force you to play it, so you can generally trade things like Harvest Golem, or maybe if you have the Scarlet Crusader, trade the Scarlet Crusader or the Haunted Creeper in before you play it. So you can also plan those things ahead. I think people read a little bit too much into the Battlecry effect and worry a bit too much when it really usually does not even come into effect. And sometimes it's a really good thing. If I were to choose between a Wailing Soul with the Battlecry and without the Battlecry, I would probably take the Battlecry, just because I know I can use that to my benefit. If I have a minion that gets humility'd, or if I have a minion that gets frozen, that's when Wailing Soul does come into play, and it's never really expected. So, but between the Feral Spirit, I mean, we don't really have Overload synergy, but we do have a lot of 2-drops, so maybe this will help us skip our turn 4. So since we don't have 4s, we can play a 2-drop on 2, Feral Spirit on 3, and then on turn 4 we'll be overloaded for 2, and we'll have to play another 2-drop, which is fine, and probably better for this deck. So we'll take it here. Rockbiter, I guess we'll take another Rockbiter. With this curve, I would start to rate things like Bloodlust really high, because it doesn't look like we're playing the real long game, and we'll be able to really be aggressive and grab the board early and have board control early. So Bloodlust would be really good in this deck. Here, once again, too many 2-drops, but it's pretty much better than Tauren Warrior. Even if this was a 3 mana 3/2 cannot be targeted, I'd still take the Fairy Dragon, just because the stats are better. The 2/3s really have a hard time trading up, and in our deck we already have a lot of two attack guys. We have the Mad Scientists, the Mech Warpers, the Harvest Golem, and the Feral Spirit. I think this deck is going to have problems because of that. So I'll take the Fairy Dragon here if I can stop lagging for 1 second. Whoa. Alright. A lot of 2-drops. River Croc versus Wisp versus Rorschach. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is a disgusting amount of 2-drops that we have. Is this the point where we start to value things like Frostshock? It might be. I don't think it would be a dead card. Since we do have an early curve, we should be able to make Frostshock a little bit better by edging out the extra damage that we need to help Frostshock actually kill something with our 2-drops. I don't think I've actually ever picked Frostshock in Arena. I think I'm okay picking it. We'll take it over a 2 mana 2/3. If it was a 2 mana 3/2, I'd probably take the 2 mana 3/2 so it can stay aggressive. But if it's a 2 mana 2/3 and you're playing it on turn 4 with another 2 mana 2/3 like Mech Warper, you're not really putting pressure on your opponent. It would take 3 2 mana 2/3s to kill a 4-drop, right? So we'll go with the Frostshock, add some variety to our deck. And here, how good would Windspeaker be in this deck? What are like the good targets for Windspeaker? We don't really have any big bodies except for these 3, which come out a little bit too slow. Maybe we want to take a solid 3-drop here. 1, 2, 3, 3 3-drops. I'm okay with taking the 3 here. It would be a lot better if this deck had something bigger, but I guess we'll just make this deck a lot more aggressive. Okay. So Dark Iron Dwarf is so good in this deck. We need 4-drops really badly, and also since we do have a good early game, the Battle Cry will usually come into play. So I'm really happy to see Dark Iron here. I wish the next 3 picks could be just Dark Iron, Dark Iron, Dark Iron, and I would say that this deck would turn out really strong if that were the case. But so here, Senjin versus Wolf Rider. Wolf Rider, once again, just like Bluegill, a lot stronger if you have the synergies with Flame Tongue or Bloodlust, but we don't, so we'll go with the Senjin here. Argent Commander versus Defender of Argus. Defender of Argus is actually a consideration here, although I rate Argent Commander as being one of the best rare cards, neutral rares, in Arena. The Defender of Argus could give us a play for turn 4, and also with all these little minions, I think it could be really strong. So if we look at our curve, we have 5 late game cards, 1, 2, 4 drops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 drops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2 drops. I don't think it would be bad. We kind of need to grab the board really early to win with this deck. I'm not really seeing a clear win condition in this deck. That's the problem I see with a lot of Arena decks, is that sure, they have good cards, but there's no theme. There's no theme to the deck. So it kind of just like floats around and just plays and plays until, you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh, how did I lose? It looked like I was doing pretty good that game. So this one is not really like a deck that would like outvalue any other deck. Also, it's not really aggressive or bursty enough to actually finish someone off. So that's what I'm worried about. Argent Commander would add to our reach a little bit. It would add 4 reach and also make us a little bit more board control-y. Same thing with Defender of Argus. Defender of Argus more on the board control-y side than the reach side. I played Shaman decks like this, where all we do is board control, board control, board control, and then eventually we're in top deck mode where we can't ever kill our opponent. And all we do is keep making totems, and our totems never end up doing anything because we don't have a Flame Tongue or anything to draw into. I don't want that to happen. So which card will help us actually finish out the game faster? Maybe we just take the Defender of Argus and have more control over the mid game. I think that's fine. So this deck, solid two slot with 7 2-drops. We have 5 3-drops with the Pharaoh Spirit, the Dancing Swords, the Earthen Ring, the Harvest Golem, and the Imp Master. And we have 4 4-drops. So we really picked up the 4 slot in the last couple of picks. So that's good. And then we have 5 late game cards. So that is what I'm worried about. I think the War Golem and the Mechaneer come out a little bit too slow, so we can't keep up the pressure. And it's not like we're going to outvalue our opponents. Our opponents are going to be hard removing these cards anyways. So I don't think this is a very strong deck. We don't have any value cards. The only value cards I see in this deck are maybe the Bomb Lobber, maybe the Defender of Argus, and that's about it. No other cards really can go 2 for 1 except for maybe Silverhand and Tiger. Okay, but yeah, the win condition is not clear on this deck, and it's not really our fault per se. If you looked at the draft, we kind of drafted, we got offered way too many 2s and maybe not enough mid-late game cards. We don't have the Fire Elementals. We don't have a Lightning Storm. We're missing like super premium rares. We don't have the Sunwalker, the Kodo, well, we do have Bomb Lobber. We have a Bomb Lobber, but no Azure Drake, no Argent Commander. Yeah, this is going to be a tough deck, I think. We're really going to have to get a lot of value in the mid game and stay aggressive in the early mid game to try to pull out a win. And we're going to have to take a lot of risks to actually push through damage and try to get our opponent down to 0. So my win prediction for this deck, oh man, this one's tough. I want to say like 6, 7. I think this is probably the worst deck that we've drafted together, but I think 6-7 is enough, and a lot of depending on how you see the arena, a lot of it is, you know, making the best out of what you're given. So rather than go like 12-0 with a really, really strong deck, sometimes it's more fun and more interesting to play a worse deck and see how well you can do. So we will be posting the results of this deck on the site. And yeah, thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed this arena draft walkthrough, and we'll be back next week with another one. See you guys later. You can catch me on twitch.tv/Ratsmah. Peace out.